Hi folks, I'm Svenson, also known as Fotofisher. I make videos about my favorite hobbies such as fly fishing, fly tying and lure making, backpacking, and of course guitar stuff. My videos are for do-it-yourselfers because if a professional can do it, so can you. Well, I did it. I bought a Firefly ES-338 guitar. I had to see for myself if a sub $200 guitar is actually worth it. My curiosity was piqued when I watched several YouTube videos that explained the good and the bad about these guitars. But I had to see for myself. I really want to dig into what these guitars are on the inside. So I bought one. And to do a sound comparison and to check quality control and to see if they're all built alike, I bought two. So let's look at a Firefly ES-338 from the inside out. Let's get going. I'm going to take this red and green tape and I'm going to mark the things I don't like with red and the things I do like with green all over this guitar, and we'll go down through it from head to toe. All right, here we are at the workbench, and I've marked the guitar with red and green tape tags. Let's cover what those mean. Let's start at the headstock. First thing that I notice is that the Firefly logo and the JSN logo, which is evidently the manufacturer of the guitar, is silk screened on. And you can see where the silk screen actually slid. Really not sharp edges. Not a big fan of that branding. That needs some work in my opinion. There's some good and bad in here. Let's take a look. The bad is, in most of the guitar finish work, there's quite a bit of the polishing compound that has dried and is underneath or visible in some cases along the guitar body. So that would have to be cleaned up. What do I think is good? Easy access to the nut so that we can adjust the fretboard. Out of the box, the action is not bad. I wouldn't really adjust it right now. I'd let it climatize to where I live in the Rocky Mountains for 6 to 8 months, and then take a look at setting that up to my taste. Something that's good, this is a bone nut. I don't know what kind of bone. Most common bone used is cow bone these days, but it needs a little bit of edge work. It's a little sharp here, but that is easy to do and it only takes a couple minutes. Got some red spots here. Let's take a look. If you can see, the router bit to cut out the trapezoidal pearloid inlays was a round bit that was much too large for the hole it was cutting. So each of these corners have a round edge to them. Each one of these is like that. So it's not really precise, but then again, it's probably machine cut CNC style. So it is what it is for the price of the guitar. There's some good and bad here on the sides. If you can see, the frets have some file marks on the edges, not a clean finish work on the edge of the frets. There is no fret sprout on this neck. It's nice and smooth along the entire neck, so not too bad. I'm pretty pleased. I think the polish job on the frets is pretty decent. I probably will touch it up a little bit, but out of the box for a $189 guitar, not too bad. There's a light spot. Let's see if I can't get it. You can see it over here better. Light spot here and a light spot here. So it's definitely a stained wood. It's a fretboard stain and polish combined, I think, that you'll need to clean off. Here's just some more example of dried polishing compound. And on the pickup itself, there was just some smudge marks from a sticker. I don't know, just like that. Now, if you can see, as I move the camera around, See the dents straight out of the factory. You can see a pit in that pickup too. And we'll come down here. I think this is a nice feature about this guitar is it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layer banding. And it's pretty consistent around the entire edge of the guitar. It's a nice touch. And the finish work on it is decent. There's no really large gaps or inconsistencies in the banding. So I like that a lot. The other thing I like, these are actually D'Addario strings, the colored string nuts. So that's an indication it's D'Addario. But then again, that could be ripped off too, and who knows. I do not like the knife edge bridge at all. In fact, one of these, I forget which one on this guitar, if you take the strings off, it's kind of tough to do here, but it rattles back and forth and it will actually buzz. And you've probably heard or seen that in other YouTube videos. So we're going to replace that for sure. I don't have any comments on the tail stop. I think that's just fine. You're going to see, if I can get right there, see that little finish imperfection on the edge of the tape right here? So that's throughout the guitar. You can see that little finish imperfection. I'm not going to mark all of them, but that's consistent throughout the guitar. Just little tiny imperfections, but if you look at it straight down, you're never going to see it. Here's some more examples of finish polish, dried finish polish. And it's rough on the edges on the inside. You can see on the inside of the F-hole. See that little rough edge there? That's consistent throughout as well. I do like the knobs. They have the pots and knobs feel consistent, have a consistent feel to them. And these knob controls are not unlike what I find on more expensive guitars. I don't like the way the volume controls work at all. It has definitely a serious treble roll-off. It is not linear. It is more logarithmic, meaning you'll turn it, you'll turn it, you'll turn it, you'll not hear much of a change, and all of a sudden, boom, you'll see a volume degradation, both in treble and volume itself. Nothing wrong with the switch. I think the switch is solid. Again, it's a much simpler piece on a guitar, so I wouldn't expect it to be too bad. And I was surprised the nut is, or the output jack, this is not an input jack, sound comes out of that thing, is solidly put in place. It doesn't rattle, the nut's not loose, so I was pleased with that. Here's another example of some fret polish and some rough edges on the inside. One thing about the book matched, I should say, finish is it's not consistent all the way. You can see right there where the milling for the two pieces for the book matching of the veneer on top has a little gap. Not a big deal. You can't see it from arm's length away. It's only when you study the guitar. Right here at the end, you can see where there's a chip in the book matched pieces of wood, and they had to fix it with a small piece of wood. And some of the stains spilled over on the banding on the edge of the guitar. Again, you can't see it from arm's length away, so it's not a big deal. There's really nothing to note on the back. It's not completely polished mirror shine. There are small scratches, but it's so small to notice with the camera. If you get your eyes on top of it, you can see where there's sandpaper marks going somewhat diagonal against the grain, and that has kind of stuck into the finish itself. The neck, I guess it's maple. It's tough for me to tell. It is a set neck, a joint here where they put on the headstock. You can see the color differentiation. Sorry about the light glare there. And then finally, the tuning pegs are not bad. They're not bad. I've actually seen worse. I expected worse. but I am going to replace these to locking tuners. So there's a head to toe look at the Firefly ES-338. Let's look at the fretboard wood material. I think there are a few types of woods that we can rule out because they're on protected species list. Those woods are listed here. That leaves us with a few viable options to consider: Indian laurel, ovencoal, maca wood, jatoba, and palfero. If you look at the fretboard wood on this Firefly, it has light and dark streaks in the wood. And it has very porous grain, as evidenced by the dark stain that has taken into the pores. So let's see if we can use these visual clues to determine what kind of wood this is. Indian laurel is readily available and often used as a decorative veneer. It also has the light and dark streaks in the wood, and it does have some very porous grain. Ovencoal is readily available, but it's one of the softer fretboard woods used. It does have light and dark streaking in the wood, but I don't believe the pores are as pronounced as what's on the Firefly 338. Maca wood is readily available, commonly used as a decorative wood, and it does have great characteristics for fretboard wood. It does have dark and light streaking, like the fretboard wood on the 338, and I think the pores are exposed, similar to the pores on the wood used on the Firefly guitar. Jatoba is readily available and inexpensive. It has great characteristics for a fretboard wood, and it's known to be used for many lower cost guitar fretboards. But I don't see dark and light streaking like on the Firefly guitar, and I think the pores on the jatoba are much smaller and it's a finer grain wood. The final option is palfero. It's readily available, but it is slightly higher priced than the other woods. It is now used by Fender, by the way. I do have a Jazzmaster with a palfero fretboard. So let's review. I think Indian laurel, maca wood, and jatoba rise to the top. But what order would you put them in? My first choice would be maca wood. I like the pronounced dark and light streaking, and I think the grain is porous like what's on the Firefly ES-338. My second choice is Indian laurel. It does have dark and light streaking in the wood grain, however it is less pronounced. And it does have a porous wood grain, but the pores are smaller. My third choice, a distant one, is jatoba. There's almost no dark or light streaking in the wood grain, and the wood grain itself is much finer. However, it is known to be used in many low-cost guitars, so I can't rule this one out. So, which wood do you choose? Let me know in the comments below. One thing that these guitars will need is some conditioning of the fretboard. As you can see, I put some fretboard conditioning oil, it's just lemon oil, on some of the pieces of the fretboard in between the frets, and you can see that just a minute and it's already soaked in some areas, and it's just sitting here soaking in slowly in some other areas. So as you put this stuff on, let it sit for a while. Let it sit for maybe a half hour. Well, you're not conditioning the fretboard if you don't let it soak in. So there's my tip for the day on how to condition a fretboard. One thing I noticed is that the screw top pull pieces are exceptionally high on this guitar. They typically are more like what is found on the bridge pickup. So that would need to be adjusted. And this neck pickup is sitting quite low because the pull pieces are quite high. I think that needs to be evened out. Now we're going to check the resistance of these pickups. Resistance is just one of the measurements that dictate the type of sound you're going to get out of a pickup, but not the only thing that would dictate the sound. So let's take a look. I've got the switch on the rhythm setting, so I'm on the neck pickup. Let's take a look at what the resistance measurement is. So right around 12, if you can see on the multimeter. So that's a pretty high reading for a pickup. Let's put the pickup selector on the bridge pickup, and let's see what the measurement is here. So again, right around 12. So they're a matched set in terms of the resistance readings. All right, I'm in the process of removing the pickup. So I've already removed the neck pickup. And I'm in the process of removing the bridge pickup. And I wanted to show you some of the craftsmanship, or lack thereof, inside of the wiring. And here you can see this is the volume pot for the neck pickup. And that shielded ground coming from the pickup is barely soldered on to the ground of the housing of the pot for volume on that bridge pickup. So that concerns me a little bit. I did notice that there are some caps on the tone pots, little green caps of some sort. I'll measure their numbers here in a little bit, but just wanted to show you kind of what I'm finding as I'm tearing this guitar apart. By the way, here's a nifty trick you can use to make relocating volume and tone pots back into the original holes through F-holes on a F-hole guitar. I learned this from installing some TV Jones pickups into another hollow body that I have. I just affixed some clear tubing to the hosel of the volume or tone pot, whatever you want here, and brought it back out through the hole. And so I have this extra, at least a good foot that I can play with. And then when I go to kind of put that back into its place, I can pull this hose right up and it'll align the hosel of the volume or tone pot perfectly. It's a great way to make a rather difficult job much simpler. You'll notice on the tone potentiometers there's a green capacitor, a chiclet style capacitor. The specs on those capacitors, and they're both the same on the tone pots for the bridge and the neck, they're 0.047 microfarad capacitors coming in at 100 volts. So it's more than capable of handling guitar signal. Usually a half a volt to 1 volt cap is sufficient here, but most people often hear of orange caps, which have the polypropylene dielectric material on the inside. These are the green caps. The dielectric material on the inside is silver mica. It's pretty cheap, and it's usually found in low-priced guitars like this one. So those are typically used for single coils, not humbuckers. Humbuckers, you usually use a 0.022 microfarad capacitor. So there's a reason why I think they used a higher value microfarad capacitor, because we noticed in the previous video segment that the pickups are extremely hot. They're 50% hotter than a normal humbucker would be in a Gibson guitar, for example. The tone cap is a filter, right? It sends certain frequencies to ground. Caps don't add tone. These measured at 0.048 and 0.050 microfarads, so they're right within the boundary of the specs of a cap like this. Just remember that a 0.022 microfarad capacitor rolls off less treble and allows more bright tones to come through, whereas a 0.047 microfarad capacitor will roll off more treble, let less treble tones come through. So this capacitor is going to make this guitar sound more bassy, boomy, muddier in some cases, because as the tone is rolled off, it's letting less of that treble through. And again, I think it's because we have hot pickups in this guitar. That was probably why this was paired with those pickups. All right, there's a couple things about the pickup cavities I wanted to share with you during my inspection. First, this paste that's excessive from polishing the guitar is still damp and malleable. You can see I can roll it and paste it. You can see it's still damp. It's not a powder yet. So that concerns me that there's still moisture inside this guitar pickup cavity here. Secondly, look how the neck is set inside the center block that goes down through the center of the guitar here. There are huge gaps. Sorry for the focusing problems, but you can see there's huge gaps. That concerns me, and here's why. The resonance of the strings on the neck going through the center block of a center block hollow body is important. I have a Gretsch that has a center block on it, and the resonance and sustain on that guitar is awesome. I'm not so sure I'm going to get good resonance and sustain out of this neck because there are huge gaps, and I don't know how far back that gap goes. So that's something that is just not a good build quality. However, it's a gorgeous guitar. The wood, the veneer is really good. In fact, let's take a look at the thickness of the veneer. That's a good 1/4 of an inch, and it's 5 layers. And the top layer, the spalted maple, is actually kind of thick. After measuring the ohm resistance of these pickups, I've written the K value on the back of them for future reference. I'm going to wax pot these and put them back in this guitar and not going to change any of the capacitors, the volume pots, the tone pots, anything. All I'm going to do is just wax pot these so they have less feedback. Okay, so I finished wax potting these pickups. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to wax pot a pickup, so I saved you the time of watching me do it. But I used 80% paraffin, 20% beeswax. I want you to take a look at the neck, by the way. While I was potting the pickups, all of the oil, the lemon oil, 2 coats absorbed into that wood. I have not rubbed it at all. You can see where there might be some that has not soaked in yet, but this is about after an hour. That wood soaked up all of that oil, so that's pretty interesting. I decided I was going to put on a roller bridge on this guitar. I'm going to do it on the other one as well. After I do a serious set of mods to that one, that'll be in another video. But I had an extra one laying around. This is a Wilkinson. And I was very fortunate that these adjustment poles fit the existing threaded hosels that go into the center block. So I didn't have to drill any hole larger to fit the hosels for these pins. And if you can see the difference in size between the 2 posts that hold up the tuning bridge. So we put that back in there, and something of interest. So I noticed that there was some Chinese writing on the back of these, of this knife edge bridge. And I decided I wanted to find out what that was. So what that means is the right hand symbol means big, and the left hand symbol means small. And that's for the big strings and for the small strings when they assemble these pieces that go back and forth here. You can see I've already pulled through the tubing. It makes reassembling really quick. I probably did that in a matter of 5 minutes. So it's not as gruesome a task as most people make it out to be. Okay, let's do a sound check between the 2 Firefly ES-338s. The first one, without the pick guard, so I had removed the pick guard to do some work on it. This is the one that I took apart and showed you what it looked like from the inside out. Notice I have a little bit of wire cleanup here to do. I'll do that later. So what happened on this guitar? I put a Wilkinson roller bridge. I adjusted the pickup heights and adjusted the pole heights as well. I wax potted the pickups, and I put on a fresh set of strings. I also treated the neck wood, which I did on both of these. All right, so that's what I did on this one. Remember, that's essentially the wax potted pickups are the test here on the one without the pick guard. On the other model, I put on a roller bridge. I did not adjust the pickup height, so I left that factory, put on a fresh set of strings. That's about all I did on this one. All right, so let's see if we can tell the difference between one that has been adjusted slightly and one that is essentially out of the factory. I'll be running the sound check through a 1972 Fender Deluxe Reverb. I'll be recording with a Svenson C03 microphone set next to the amp. I'll be doing some clean tones and some dirty tones, and I'll use the mythical overdrive clone as my overdrive pedal, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So what did you think? Here are my final thoughts about the Firefly ES-338. Got my little cheat sheet here. For sound, I thought the stock pickups sounded a little muddy. So wax potting the pickups, I think, helped quite a bit. That's something you might want to consider doing. It added clarity, a little bit of a volume boost, and I really liked how it sounded when we put it through a distortion or an overdrive pedal. I thought sustain was particularly good, considering we looked at that neck set and found the big gaps between the set of the neck here inside of the center block of the guitar. So surprisingly good. Things that I thought were a little bit underwhelming. The polishing compound I found to be a bit excessive. There was even some out on the final surface here, not necessarily even in the cavities of the guitar. The fretboard was particularly dry, and when I played it for the first time, the black stain that is used to darken the wood for the fretboard came off on my fingers. So you'll want to clean the fretboard and condition it for sure. The frets are rough in some spots, but honestly, what guitar doesn't have rough frets or frets that don't appeal to your playing style? Even some of my higher end $1,000 plus guitars still need fretwork. I know that the fret nut up here needed a little bit of polishing and rounding off. It was a bit sharp on the edges, so you might want to consider that. I thought the treble bleed capacitors were really of low quality, and one thing I'm going to do to one of these guitars is change them out to orange caps. The neck set, I think, had way too big a gap, as we discussed. The pickups are marginal, and as we showed in an earlier video segment, they had potting and denting in them straight from the factory. So with a minimal investment, or if you have some humbuckers laying around, putting them in this guitar may not hurt. There are some good things about the ES-338. Let's cover those. Out of the box, I like the action of the neck. I wouldn't change it until this guitar has time to settle into the climate where I live. And the fretboards and the frets required almost no adjustments. Outside of polishing and some cleaning up of the edges, the frets were very level. I like the bone nut. You don't see that on even some guitars that cost 2-3 times the amount of money of this guitar. The pearloid inlays, despite not being entirely accurate, look rather good. And I think the wood finish and the choice of wood and how they finished out the guitar is immaculate for a sub $200 guitar. Acoustically, strumming it unplugged, I think it has a really good voice. I compare that to some of my other hollow bodies that are on the wall behind me, and this one definitely has a stronger voice than some. So, as the video shows, with a little bit of DIY effort, this guitar can sound really good. Thanks for watching.